Hi everyone, and welcome to my Stoney through of Manhunt on the PS4. Now this is of course part of Sony's remastered PS2 series known as PS2 on PS4, and they released these on the PSN Marketplace from $10 to $15. Manhunt is $14.99. They also just released Bully as well, another one of Rockstar's classic PS2 titles. Now Manhunt has and will always have a very, very special place in my heart, as it was one of my all-time favorite video games upon release. Now, if you're my age, many of you may not have been as fortunate enough to play this game upon release, as it was extremely controversial, and if you were under 18 and had to rely upon your parents getting it, you pretty much had to have the most trusting parents on the planet, and luckily I did, and I'm here and haven't turned into a psychopathic murderer, thanks to Jack Thompson's fucking bullshit rambling about this game, claiming it's a murder simulator. First and foremost, Manhunt is a survival horror game. This is not a murder simulator. You are not a psychotic murderer out on a killing spree. You are a death row inmate who was going to be executed, but for reasons unknown to you, you are kidnapped by a mysterious man played by Brain Cox, known as the director, who wants you to star in his own snuff film. Already seems like the type of premise and storyline that we've never seen in video games before, and never since. Now, I can understand that this is some really disturbing subject matter, and the game is violent. I mean, look at these executions. That's pretty brutal. And unlike other games like Grand Theft Auto or Gears of War, Resident Evil, any of the violent games that you can really think of, this game has something else going for it in terms of its story, premise, and atmosphere. It feels very realistic, but more than that, really. What this game really has going for it is immersion. But even though, you know, this is from the PS2 era and the graphics are dated and, you know, the mechanics may not make logical sense in the real world, this is the game that really took its mechanics and tried to make them make sense, be as realistic as possible, but still make gameplay satisfying, challenging, and intense. Now, in this game, you're not Batman. You get into a one-on-one fight, you can probably win and survive that. But you get into a fight with more than 2 hunters on your side and one of them have a gun? You're going to be dead in seconds. This is a very challenging game. Before Dark Souls, there was Manhunt. Now, sure, I'm playing this on the normal setting known as Fetish, which gives you the radar, and of course the enemies are a little dumber and they don't deal quite as much damage. Hardcore will make you shit your pants. It's that scary. This is a game that was actually scary. And to be honest, even to this day, it's still extremely tense. You know, when I'm playing it, my pulse races, you know, it's an intense game, and that's great. You know, if you're wanting a horror game, it should put you on edge, it should make you feel tense. And if you're doing a game like this with this kind of premise, you need that kind of graphic violence, because you're a man who's being forced to do some pretty brutal shit to survive. But in my book, violence like this is a lot less damaging. My bad, I didn't mean to say more, but it's a lot less damaging than the types of violence you see in PG-13 action films. My reasoning for this is when I played this as a kid, you know, I was 12 when this came out, and I got it for Christmas, and I immediately on Christmas Eve ran up and started playing it in my room with the lights off, and I was scared. This game was creepy. I felt like I was this dude put in this horrible city known as Carcer City, that's basically their version of Detroit, much like Vice City is Miami and Liberty City is New York. This is a rundown, derelict, creepy city, and along with the creepy visuals and just this disturbing kind of imagery that the game has, it has this really chilling soundtrack as well that's very reminiscent of things that you would see John Carpenter doing in the 80s. And it's all of these things rolled together that just made this one of my favorite games when I played it. And I mean, I've played this game consistently since it came out. I haven't played it in a few years at this point, but I remember having the PS2 copy for several years, and then when I got a 360, I ended up getting an Xbox copy, which I believe had slightly better controls, but it's been so long that I can't truly remember. And, you know, I played that game forever until I eventually lost my copy somehow. And after that, I ended up, you know, along with all the other fans, begging Rockstar and pleading and hoping that they would eventually make Manhunt 2. And, of course, they did, and there were a lot of mixed opinions about the game. I will stand by Rockstar and say that that was a really solid experience, but it just can't hold a candle to the original. You know, the second game has better combat mechanics, and it also removes this rating system, which I think was mainly done to appease the ESRB. But what I think is kind of interesting about this game is it has so much context, and there's so much lore to it, that you can really play it and not only role play within the game, but just think about the different possibilities with the storyline. For example, the game and the director encourages you to do vicious, brutal killings. You're going to see one of the most brutal kills that you can perform with a baseball bat by the end of the video. But you can, if you go up to an enemy and you just tap the button when you're behind them, you'll perform a hasty execution, which is really fast, but you won't get points for it at all, hardly. If you hold the button down longer, eventually the cursor will go from white to yellow to red, with each level being a more gruesome execution. That's what the director wants you to play, but I always thought it was kind of interesting to play against the game instead of going for a high score, just fight to survive, because, you know, the director is the villain of this game. Why would you really want to do what he wants you to do? You just want to survive. So I think there's so much interesting context to this game that was shoved aside when it was released, when everybody was talking about how brutal and violent it was, and yes, it is. I mean, you can perform some extremely gruesome kills, and unlike many other games, the violence is detailed. The people have wounds on them. The corpses have wounds on them. If you bash their head open with a baseball bat, you will see their brains splatter on the wall and slowly drip down, and then you'll see their maimed corpse lying on the ground, and it's some pretty vivid imagery, and I really like that. You know, I like when a game has gritty, realistic violence, because it can scare you and it can show you that violence has impact. And I definitely don't think many kids should be playing this game. I think under 10, hell no. But if you're over 12 and you're a reasonable person who knows right from wrong, and you had good parents that actually, you know, raised you decently, this game is not going to turn you into a mass murdering psychopath. Because you're not in this game. You're a guy on your run being chased around. If you get into a brawl with some of these guys, they'll fucking kill you. Like, in an instant. Anytime I get seen by somebody in this game, my first instinct is to run and hide. How many games do you really do that in? How many stealth games do you really have to go run and hide when you get spotted? Because the truth is, a lot of stealth games will do a couple of things. If you get spotted, there'll be an alarm, mission failed. Okay. Other stealth games, you're reasonably adept at combat, so it's not really an issue for you. You can take your enemies down and then wait for the alarm to go down, whatever. This game, I really like that you have to run around, lose your enemy's sight, but then you can lure them to you and kill them. I mean, you're really stalking your prey in this game. And you just don't see that in many other games. As a matter of fact, I don't think I have seen mechanics like this in any other game since Manhunt 2. And for me, that's what keeps me coming back to this game, is just how original it is. And, you know, it's one thing for a game to have a really original premise and great atmosphere, great visuals, and an intriguing storyline. But without great gameplay and being well designed, you know, these games can be rather poor experiences. But luckily, Manhunt is one of those games that managed to get pretty much everything right. The controls can be a bit clunky at times, but the truth of the matter is, this game is just so intense and so satisfying that it's easy to overlook the few shortcomings in the game. Now, with all that being said, is this a game that will appeal to everyone? Hell no. You know, this is a really violent game. For some people, I think this game will be incredibly disturbing, and possibly one of the most traumatizing experiences of their life. You know, if you're one of the type of people who sits down and really gets into a game, and like me, you like to smoke while you play, you know, really get into that experience, this might be one that will really scare the crap out of you. But a lot of people like that, me included. You know, this isn't just a game that you're reveling in the graphic violence. Of course that is a part of it, and I'd be lying if I said walking up to these scumbags like these guys who are representing these white, racist skinhead motherfuckers and beating them to death with a baseball bat is cathartic, satisfying, and a great stress reliever, which is kind of odd because the game can be a mildly stressful experience, but it's that good kind of intense stress that you get from a good horror movie or a good horror game. It's not like real stress, but it's that tense, just like your hands feel a little clammy, your heart rate, your heart's going, you know, and you're just like, I really don't want to die right now. I don't want to have to reload my save. And that's what I think is interesting about this game. It has no real penalties for death. You just reload your checkpoint, but the checkpoints are so perfectly placed, at least on the normal setting. I haven't played it on the more difficult setting, so I can't really speak for that. But they're so perfectly placed that it gives you enough incentive that you don't want to die to lose that progress. But if you do, it's not disheartening nor frustrating, because if you die, it's really your fault because you can exploit the AI. It's very easy to disappear in the shadows. As long as you're not seen going into the shadows, you're invisible. And you can sneak up to people and take them out like this. Bop! But on the upside, if you're in levels where the enemies have guns, it becomes a much faster paced, much more frenetic experience. Now, I haven't reached those levels on my PS4 copy, and I actually never even finished the game on the PS2 just because I was never good enough to finish it. I actually got stuck at a relatively early level in the game, but I still loved playing it. And I got much further on my Xbox playthrough, but I still, again, never completed it there. But I did play the gunplay levels and got far enough in to really experience the meat of the game, and I was like, this is such a great game. It doesn't let you down. The pacing is superb, because when you finally get a little bored of the sneaking and the running and the hiding and the hunting, you get weapons, and you get, well, of course you start off with like melee weapons, crowbars, knives, and all that crap. But then you get guns, and you can start blowing people away, and then it shifts back to stealth and back to action. The story isn't perfect, but there's just so much detail there, especially with the dialogue from the enemies and the director, that it's just an incredible experience from top to bottom. And expect my full written review very soon on my blog, megamediaoverload.blogspot.com. And thanks for watching, guys. Smoke up and cheers.